Hi everyone, this is our first chapter actually in our last module, module 4, and now we're going to talk about organizational level factors and organizational level phenomena that actually play a part or influence the behavior of individuals in organizations. And so in this chapter, we're going to focus on three very important organizational level factors that are of influence, power, and politics. So I hope you stay engaged, and I hope this is interesting to you, and you're able through this chapter to link what we're saying to some of the material that we've covered in the past. Well, at the beginning of the chapter in your text, it asks the question, how do you get people to do what you would like them to do? This is, in essence, the crux of influence. Influence is all about getting people to act and to do things in a manner in which you prescribe. And here we see 9 generic influence tactics that people in everyday life, as well as leaders and even employees within organizations, use in order to get people to act and behave in the manner that they desire them to behave in. The first one is rational persuasion. That's where you try to use logic and fact, reasoning to influence somebody to act in a certain way. So for example, in a class, I might try to document or demonstrate to you the high correlation between studying and doing well in this class. And so by using that fact, by using that logic, I'm hoping to convince you to study. Inspirational appeals, that has to do more with evoking emotions and targeting people's values. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, even Adolf Hitler use this type of influence approach, really getting into stirring up people's emotions. A consultation, that's really where you start getting people to participate and be a member in the decision making process, so they now feel like they have some voice and they're therefore more committed to it and likely to behave and act in that manner. Ingratiation, kind of getting somebody in a good mood, buttering them up, if you will, telling them how great they are and just kind of getting them to see you favorably before you actually ask them to do something for you. Personal appeals, that's when you target the things like friendship and loyalty. You say, hey, listen, I was there for you, I did this for you, now you need to do this for me. Exchange, where you make some explicit or a promise or some implied promise saying, listen, if you help me in this, I'm going to help you in something else in the future. Coalition tactics, you kind of get somebody else or others to support you, kind of bring people along, and say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask for this. Can you kind of be on my side? A lot of times teenagers do this. They try to get one parent on their side so they can kind of build a coalition against the other parent. Pressure, where you kind of demand compliance, so you almost try to intimidate, extort in some rare instances. And legitimating tactics, it's based on a request of one's authority or right. So I say, listen, the reason why you need to show up for this class is because I'm the teacher and I have the legitimate authority to ask you to be here, to be present. So that's all of these are these generic ways that you influence. Well, as you'll soon see, the influence tactic that you use can actually lead to a potential influence outcome, the outcome that's generated through that tactic. One specific outcome that can occur from an influencing approach is commitment, and that's really the one that you want. It's substantial agreement followed by initiative and persistence in pursuit of common goals. What you've done here is you've basically gotten somebody to voluntarily accept your wishes, to do what you would like them to do, but they are essentially committed. They don't feel like they're being forced to. They buy into it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. again, when he was able to influence others, they bought into his message, they bought into his purpose, and then they were committed to the cause as he was. You can also get compliance. And compliance is obviously not as good as commitment. You get someone to do what you want them to do. They are behaving in the manner you would like them to behave to, but they are doing this reluctantly. They feel like in some way they're being forced to do this. So it's not a voluntary action. I'm doing it because you asked me to do that, or because you demanded this of me, or because you can pressure me into doing this. So I feel like I'm forced to do it, so I'm doing it just simply because of the pressure being applied, the force being applied to me. And then And then the third type of outcome is resistance, and that's definitely not what you want to have. So if you try to influence someone, they can actually stall, they can, delay doing what you ask them to do. They could just kind of go on arguing about it. Again, going back to teenagers, you see this a lot. I'm trying to influence, I'm trying to make you do something, and you're like, no, I'll do it, I'm never getting to it. Unproductive argue, just outright rejection, rebellion. No, I am not going to do this. You cannot force me to do this. I do not buy into your arguments. Forget it. It's not going to happen. And so those are the three types of outcomes that can arise from some type of influencing interaction, excuse me. Well, some research and practical insights into influencing and influential tactics. It says here the first one is commitment is more likely when the influence attempt involves something important or enjoyable. So when there's something really on the line here, where there's something that people see as being highly valuable or mattering a lot, you will tend to see a large level of commitment being occurring through the influential process. Think back again to Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. People remain committed to that, even onto death, even onto prison, because they really believed in it. And also you can evoke commitment by influencing people to do something that they're likely to enjoy. So the more enjoyment I find of it, the more likely I'll stay committed to it. Credible people tend to be the most persuasive, meaning that they are the ones that are most trustworthy. People trust them, whether that be they trust their character, whether it be they trust their words, or whether it be that they trust their ability to do what they said they can do. And so the more credible you're seen as, the more likely I'm going to buy into what you're asking me to do. Employees are more apt to accept change when managers rely on a consultative strategy, meaning that when I kind of bring you into the change process, when I allow you to participate, when you feel like you have a voice and you can take part, then there is a level of procedural justice, there is a level of trust, and there is a level of commitment to the decision because I was in fact, or employees were in fact part of the process. So all of these make sense to why we would see these types of outcomes occurring from influencing. Well, a researcher named Robert Cialdini did some research in this area of influencing and persuasion, and he said that there are certain things that you can do or certain ways that you can act that can actually increase your ability to influence and persuade others. He says the first one is liking. And obviously, people tend to like those who like them. So if you show an interest, a sincere interest in someone, then they're likely to show an interest in you. They're likely to like you, and therefore they'll be more likely to be influenced by you. Reciprocity is belief that both good and bad deeds should be repaid in kind. It's virtually universal. So if I do something good for you, you would tend to want to do something good for me. By contrast that, if I do something bad, then you're likely to want to do or want to act in a manner that's negative towards me. So that's the idea of reciprocity. If I do something for you, if I'm kind to you, if I listen to you, you're going to likely act in a way positively to me. Social proof. People tend to follow the lead of those most like themselves. So I'm likely to be influenced highly by people that act like me or that have value systems like me. Another way that you can increase the likelihood of influencing someone or persuading someone is through consistency. He says people tend to do what they're personally committed to do. So oftentimes, like for radio stations, for example, they'll have like telethons where people can call in and make pledges. And at that moment, they're not actually giving them the money. Now you can perhaps do it online, but most times people are just making these pledges. They're saying that they're going to do something. And the reality is the majority of people that do this actually follow through and pay the money, give the donation. And the reason why is, as human beings, if we make some kind of commitment to something, we verbally say, okay, I'm going to do this, then you are most likely to be persuaded in the future to do it because you want to act consistently to what you've said in the past. Authority, people tend to defer and respect credible experts. And what that means is that if people recognize you have some type of credibility, you have some type of qualification, they're more likely to be influenced by you. Think about it. When you go to the doctor and you recognize that this person has some kind of training, some kind of knowledge in this area, and they say, you know what, you need to do this. Even if it sounds rather, strange, you're more likely to listen to them than you are to listen to, let's say, your neighbor who's really never gone to med school. And then the scarcity. People want items or information or opportunities that have limited availability. So if you're able to offer somebody some information or some type of resource that they cannot necessarily get anywhere else or others can't necessarily get, then they're more likely to want to be influenced, by you. Well, regardless of the type of influencing tactic that you do, in order to influence, you need power. Power is the ability to influence, or gives you the ability to influence. And power, so to socially influence, is what we call social power. And here it is defined as the ability to marshal the human information and material resources to get something done. Essentially, to be able to influence or to make influential decisions in the organization to get things accomplished that you desire to see accomplished. Well, two researchers, French and Raven, came up with what they describe as the five bases of power. And the five bases of power can be distinguished between whether or not the power comes from the person, some type of personal characteristic, or whether the power comes from the position of the individual within the organization, their legitimate authority, if you will, or their ability to impose certain types of rewards or incentives or even punishment because of their position in the organization. So these five bases of power, the two person power areas, if you will, are in fact expert and referent, and the three positional power are reward, coercive, and legitimate power. Looking at the three areas of positional power, reward power is obtaining compliance by promising or granting reward. So I can get you to do something, I can influence you by having the ability to provide some type of incentive. So my manager might say to me, listen, I need you to work extra time on this new project, but if you do it, I am going to give you a bonus. I'm going to give you a more pay, and that's reward power. So I'm going to be influenced to do that because of the incentive that can be provided. Coercive power is actually not getting someone to do something because of some rewards, but it's actually getting them to act in a certain manner because of the threat of punishment. So obtaining compliance through threatened or actual punishment. So my boss might say, listen, if you don't in fact do this report, you are likely to lose your job. And in that case, that's more, I feel that I'm being forced there. There's some pressure being applied to me. So those are two types of positional power. The third type of positional power is legitimate power. I obtain compliance through formal authority. So when I stand in the class, for example, and I tell a student, listen, you need to be quiet or you need to sit down, they often will listen to me because they accept that I have some type of legitimacy, I have some type of bestowed authority, and therefore I can make that claim to them. I can influence them to act in that way simply because of my position. Same thing with police officers. Doesn't matter how small or physically large a police officer is. Most times when a police officer stops you, you listen to them and you do or you acquiesce to their demands just simply because of their legitimate power. Well, all three of those power bases, reward, coercive, and legitimate power, they all come from, again, the positional authority of the individual. They're not necessarily something to do with the individual. We don't know anything about that police officer. The only reason that we're listening to him or her is because of that badge. Well, there are two bases of power that really come from the personal characteristics. One is expert power, and that's where I comply and I am influenced by someone because of their knowledge or information. A lot of times you see this occurring between athletes and coaches. Athletes believe that their coaches know what they're talking about. And so because of that, they're likely to listen to the coach because they believe in the coach's information, believe in the knowledge. That's expert race. So it isn't just because the coach is the coach, I'll listen to it. That happens in some cases, but many times athletes listen to their coach because they believe that they know what they're talking about. The other type of personal power is referent power, and that's obtaining compliance through charisma or personal attraction. That's where you just listen and you're influenced by someone because you like them. You really, really like them, and therefore you buy into their philosophy. Going up to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a very charismatic leader, people bought into his dream, people bought into his purpose because of that level of charisma, because they were personally attracted. The same thing with President Obama, especially in his first election. People were talking about how much they liked President Obama, how much they believed in President Obama, and it wasn't because he was a senator, he was someone running for office, but it was because of that personal affiliation they felt to him. Well, much like the type of influencing tactic that you use can lead to specific outcomes, the type of power that you use can also lead to some types of outcomes. And it says here, expert and referent power had a generally positive effect. That kind of makes sense because in those types of power, you really are doing things voluntarily because you either believe in the person's knowledge or you believe in the person's character or believe in the person's a being, if you will. So this is more so of a voluntary action. You're really committing to this person or this person's ideal, like, because you want to. Reward and legitimate power had a slightly positive effect. Again, in those cases, you are acting because you feel like you need to act, but there's some benefit associated with that. In the reward power, of course, you're getting stuff. The legitimate power, you accept the fact that this person should have power over you, and therefore you don't feel like you're being taken advantage of. In the coercive power, however, you have this negative effect. You have a negative effect being occurring because in this situation, you are definitely being pressured or forced into doing something. You don't necessarily accept that you should be, or you should have to listen to this person like this, or you should be asked to do this. But because they are threatening you, you have no real choice but to act in accordance with their demands. Well, that's why we've been talking about how managers influence and how they wield power. But the reality is, in most organizations now, we talk a lot about employee empowerment, employees actually being able to influence, and employees actually having power within the organization. And it happens to employee empowerment. It says here it's the recognizing and releasing into the organization the power that people already have in the wealth of their useful knowledge, experience, and internal motivation. What this suggests is within contemporary organizations, you have very intelligent people that have the ability and are already internally motivated to do certain things and to make certain decisions. However, what they need in order to be able to utilize that and leverage those abilities, leverage that knowledge, is the authority. So they don't necessarily, or they don't lack the power or the ability. What they do lack is the authority that can only come from the formal organization. And so by the organization giving them, through their management, empowering them to make decisions, allowing them to make decisions, allowing them to use their resources and manage themselves to some extent, this gives them the empowerment necessary to do what they actually already can do. And it shows here the actual evolution of power. You can start off from the inception, where it's basically all about authoritarian power, and this is kind of the early days of management, where it was all about the manager, the leader, kind of imposing decisions, command and control. We then move up to the consultation phase, where it's more about sharing of influence. Managers and leaders, they consult followers when making decisions. Does not necessarily mean that they're going to use the follower's opinion, but at least the followers now get a voice in the actual process. That leads into even a more mature stage of power evolution, the power sharing, where the manager and leader and followers jointly make decisions. So that's a little bit different from consultation. Now you're actually part of the decision-making process. Your voice is going to be heard, and you're going to help make the decision. Right up to the last stage, which is power distribution. And then let's say followers are in fact granted the authority to make decisions. So no longer is the manager there being part or overseeing the decision-making process. The manager is actually allowing you to make decisions on your own. And that's really the increase in the degree of empowerment. So we could go right up, right from actual no empowerment whatsoever. The manager has all the power, to the last stage, which is delegation, I should say, where the employee has the power. Well, employee empowerment is often coupled with this concept, and I'm certain that you've heard this before. We've actually talked about this a little bit in this class. It's participative management. It's a process whereby employees play a direct role in setting goals, making decisions, solving problems, and making changes in the organization. All of those things were normally the job or the roles that were exclusively applied to managers in organizations. But with participative management, employees are actually getting the chance to do some of these things, to make and set their own goals, to be part of the decision-making process, to solve complex problems, and again, help make the changes that the organization require. And there is, again, now, or this occurs, I should say, through empowerment, through the employee empowerment that we just saw. Well, while the organization itself can distinctly benefit from participative management, like the manager being able to be freed up to do other things, as well as employees are utilizing the creativity and the knowledge base that exists in the intellectual capital of their employees, there are some distinct benefits that employees can gain through participative management. It says here it helps them to fulfill three basic needs. The first need is the need for autonomy, and we mentioned this when we look at Hackam and Oldham's model, if you remember the job characteristic or that need to feel as if I am in control, if you will, of my destiny, that I have some type of responsibility and I'm not being micromanaged. So people that get a chance to be part of participating management get the opportunity to fulfill this need for autonomy, to feel like as if I am responsible, I have some level of control. Meaningfulness of work. Again, it makes work much more meaningful. Perhaps makes me more satisfied in what I'm doing, because now there is job enrichment. I feel as if I am contributing distinctly to something and I have a voice in the organization. And it can it can increase interpersonal contact by allowing employees and managers to interact more, by allowing employees to interact more in terms of making decisions, being part of consultative arrangements. That can also help to reduce levels of conflict in organization. And so with that interpersonal contact, that allows you again to also fulfill social needs or needs for affiliation, going back to McClellan. Well, while a lot of organizations like to say they do empowerment, many don't do it very well. And these are some of the ways that you can actually make empowerment work for you. One is to provide employees with training and development. You cannot accept, or you cannot believe that employees will be just ready to be empowered. They have to be given the tools and the training and be ready, if you will, for empowerment. So you have to provide the training that will allow them to assume these leadership roles. You have to share information with them. You cannot want your employees to participate in decisions or participate or even or delegate authority with them without giving them the information necessary to make those types of decisions. Utilizing that participative decision making, again, the consultation, getting people involved so that they don't feel like they just kind of can share an opinion, but that they're actually going to be part of the decision making process. Contingent pay practices, meaning that you tie pay to some specific type of participative management, or empowerment behavior. And selecting employees based on their positive core self-evaluation. This is huge because, again, going back to self-evaluations, we mentioned things like self-efficacy, self-esteem, those locus of control, those types of value systems help people to rise and to accept leadership roles. When they believe in themselves, when they believe in their abilities, when they believe that they can control their destiny, that's when they're most likely to want to be participative in terms of management, when they're most likely to want to be empowered, because we have to not assume that everybody wants to be empowered. We now come to our last area of discussion in this chapter. It's organizational politics. Now, unfortunately, politics has a bad connotation in our world, and I don't think that this chapter does anything to alleviate that, because it mentions here, defines here organizational politics being the intentional acts of influence to enhance or protect the self-interest of individuals or groups. So politicking here is seen as a means whereby either an individual or groups of individuals of an organization will practice certain approaches or certain influential tactics in order to basically promote or protect their own self-interest. So it's in some way distinguished from earlier influential tactics that we mentioned, where people were trying to influence leaders, or employees were trying to influence others in the organization to promote the organization's interest. In organizational politics, what really is being done is that people are trying to protect or enhance their own self-interest. And sometimes self-interest can be aligned with organizational interests, but other times it may not. So people might just be promoting their own agendas to ensure that their area, they themselves are protected or enhanced in the organization. So that's politicking. Basically kind of looking out for myself, protecting my own interests, making sure that I am actually being heard and I am actually being considered in the organization. Well, just think about it. When are you most likely to be worried about your own self-interest? When are you most likely to need to protect yourself? It happens in areas or in times of high levels of uncertainty. And these are some of the things that can create uncertainty in organizations and therefore promote organizational politics. Well, one is the unclear objectives, meaning, what exactly is to be achieved here. If I'm not certain about what is to be achieved, what goals I am supposed to actually be realizing. I might try to resort to politics, trying to resort to influencing tactics to make sure that my job is preserved and my well-being or interest is preserved in the organization. Same thing for the vague performance measures. Okay, if I'm not certain about how I'm being evaluated, what is being looked at in terms of my performance, then again may try to influence my manager. I might try politicking to make sure again that I'm okay in the organization and nobody's going to take my job. Ill-defined decision process. I am not really sure. That happens a lot in terms of promotion. Who is going to get the promotion? So maybe if I kind of, tell you how good I am and maybe how bad he is, then I could get the promotion. So when you have uncertainty in terms of decision, strong individual or group competition, of course, when there's a high level of competition, you might see a lot of politic and influence. And hey, listen, let me tell you why I'm the best person for this job and they aren't. And any type of change, anytime you have any kind of volatility, it increases uncertainty. People start getting scared and they start politicking. Well, there's three levels of political actions, if you will, in organization. The first one is the individual pursuit of self-interest. And this is kind of the one we've been talking about a little bit, where people are trying to promote their own selves, even at the expense of others. So that happens at the individual level. Think about an employee that, again, is trying to promote themselves in an organization, trying to protect their interests in an organization. They may do things in terms of, trying to curry favor with the boss, trying to provide or demonstrate to the boss that they're actually working harder than their colleagues, especially in a competitive environment. That's the type of political action that you expect at the individual level. At the coalition level, it's really where a group of people are getting together, again, to promote their interests or protect their interests. So it might be a group of individuals in the organization that want to see the organization improve their environmental policy, okay? And so they might form this coalition and try to gain support to go to management to see them change the way that they approach the environment. And that's a coalition. They normally surround themselves around an issue. A network is a little more unclear. It's a little more unclear as to how this is how this political action occurs. But it's really the pursuit of general self-interest. So you might have heard the things like the Old Boys Club. The Old Boys Club is where only a certain select people get to attain certain levels or certain positions in organizations, and because you have all these people that are retired and going into these decision-making areas, and they're protecting the interests of all the other people in the Old Boys Club, if you will. So that's a network level. Well, regardless of the level in which political action occurs, there are commonly used tactics, I should say, that occur when people politic. And one is to try to build a network of useful contacts. It's trying to getting people that are going to be helpful to you when when you're trying to politic, when you're trying to influence decisions. Having people that you can use as references that can kind of speak on your behalf is useful. Using key players to support initiatives, kind of getting very influential people that that other people in your organization will like, other people have an allegiance to, an affiliation to. Kind of getting them on your side helps in terms of your ability to influence a politic. Making friends with the power brokers, making friends with people that actually make the decisions, that the ones that are wielding the power in the organization. Self-promotion happens a lot of times where people again expound upon their virtues, try to sell themselves, if you will. Creating favorable images, doing some level of impression management, kind of showing up on time or making sure the boss sees you when you're there working late. Praising others, actually ingratiating yourselves. Hey, you know what? You're doing such a great job, boss. I totally agree with everything you do. You're an amazing person. Attacking or blaming others. You can actually not only just try to promote yourself, but it happens a lot in terms of governmental politics. You attack or you blame your competition. You actually try to bring them down. And using information as a political tool. Because you have access to some type of information that others may not have, you can actually leverage that to your own benefit.